Hello, everyone. Yeah, sorry about this. Sorry that I haven't been able to come to class. Yeah, this is like the worst sort of flu-y thing I've had for about 5 years. So, I'm not here today, and I doubt I'll be in on Thursday. I'm pretty rough, but I'm going to do these videos, and I haven't been doing these videos since COVID, so I'm just trying to remember how to do it. But I'll try my best to convey everything that we're supposed to learn this week, and hopefully, if I do like maybe. Well, yeah, I'll do like a 10-minute video now, and maybe another one I'll release on Thursday, and sorry, another one on Wednesday, and then another one on Thursday. And so hopefully it won't set you back at all. So just obviously read the slides, look at these videos, and then obviously do the quizzes as you normally would do. Okay, so this week gets interesting because we move, because up to now, if you notice, it's all been about the sort of like micro foundations of macroeconomics. Now we move into the sort of the macro, and it's this lesson where we start to get some ideas together, where we look at these. Up to now we'd be looking at how sort of different variables play off one another, like trade-offs, like how supply and demand works. Supply and demand is a model where price and quantity, they interact, and that price and quantity is often on quite a small level in a particular market. Now we actually look at how we can take these ideas, these core economic ideas, but move them from a place where we're looking at a particular individual market, and we can move them to a place where we're looking at like much larger things in aggregate. For example, a micro question would be looking at the price of an apple market. But for macro, that would be how all the markets interact to sort of, so we can look at the general level of prices in society and the level of production. So when we talk about the level of prices in society, instead of an individual price, we're talking about the change in all the prices in society, which has a name, inflation. That's what we'll look at next week. But when we think about quantity demanded, that sort of the thing on the horizontal axis, say if it's just for an individual micro market like the apple market, that would be the price of apples in a particular area. But if it's the quantity of everything that's being sold in a whole nation, for example, that becomes all about the production of a nation. And that's what we're going to be looking at today. How do we evaluate the aggregate production of a nation? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the screen and get some of our slides, and we'll see where we go from there. Okay, and so we'll go from the current slides. So this is the macroeconomic perspective. I'm going to zoom through it. I'm not going to tell you all the sort of thing, usually I sort of give all these little examples and stories to keep you focused. But this is only going to be a 10-minute video, so we're going to be sort of, very, I'm going to try and hit the major points pretty quickly. And then you can go back and you can sort of re-look at it. Okay, so today we're going to be looking at macroeconomic perspective. And basically today and throughout this week, we're looking at measuring the size of the economy, gross domestic product. Then we're going to be adjusting nominal values to real values. It's all about the level of inflation. Nominal values don't adjust for inflation. Real values do. Then we'll look at how we can track real GDP over time. Then we look at how we could compare GDP across countries. And then, in a way, step back and consider, is GDP actually a good measure for the well-being of society? Okay. So generally, there's certain times when you can sort of see that things aren't good. You know what I mean? In the 1930s in the US, there was just, hundreds, well, tens of millions of people unemployed, soup kitchens on the streets, vast hordes of people sort of trying to ride the railroads to get work, people driving across the country from, the southwest and sort of the southeast of the US to places like California to find work. Um, and it's pretty obvious that things are pretty bad. It's also the same as if you go to a very poor country. It's pretty obvious it's poor, but that's a very instinctive way of looking at whether a country is doing well or doing badly. What we want to do is find a measure of like how big is an economy and how well is it doing, and we want to find some sort of scientific method of doing that, and that's what we're going to do today. So this chart is ultimately what macroeconomics is about, because we're in a new area. And macroeconomics, generally, the goals of macroeconomic policy is economic growth, low unemployment, and low inflation. As we'll see, economic growth tends to lead to low unemployment, but can then lead to inflation. So there's a link between these three things. The framework we're going to look at it through, and this is what we're going to be building up to in the next weeks, is the aggregate demand, aggregate supply model. We're not particularly going to look at it this week, but that's where we're going. And then we're going to look at how that can be interpreted through two different frameworks. One is the Keynesian model, the other is the neoclassical model. And then we'll look at the policy tools. Monetary policy, which is what the central bank does, and fiscal policy is what the central government does. And so, so that's what we'll be looking at. Okay, so let's just start off with this definition of this very, very important thing. What is gross domestic product? And let's just go out there with the definition. It's the value of the output of all final goods and services produced within a country in a given year. So it really measures the size of a nation's overall economy. How much stuff is being made? How many services are being sold? Everything from tourism to making cars to growing food, to all these different things are all part of a nation's production. And that measures the size of a nation's overall economy. And so ultimately it can be measured in two ways. It's either the total dollar value of what consumers purchase in the economy, or it's the total dollar value of what the country produces. Now, if you think about it, at equilibrium, where supply equals demand, those will be the same number. As we'll see, there'll be reasons where maybe an economy is over-producing or things like that. But generally, we can assume they're pretty similar, those two numbers. So everything that's being made is being bought, and either being bought by people in let's say, if we're looking at it from the perspective of the US, it's being bought by people in the US, or it's being bought by people who are overseas because it's been exported. And so ultimately, if you think about it, it's probably easier to find out what people have purchased, because purchase data is always more freely available. To actually find out what the whole country produces would be more difficult, because you'd have to go through every startup, every factory, every agricultural field, and it would be quite complex. Okay, and so this all comes down to, so if we're going to look at it from the point of view of people buying things, we're going to look at who buys all of a country's production. And it's the demand, because obviously supply is on the one side, it's being produced, who is demanding it, because they're the people that's going to buy it. It's going to be four categories, four groups. One is consumers are going to be buying things, like like you're buying clothes and you're buying, internet services, and you're buying cars and all sorts of things like that. Consumption. Then businesses are going to be buying things to invest in their future. They may be buying raw materials to turn them into things they can sell. They may be, borrowing money and pumping it into a new factory, something like that. And then also, and we have to remember, a big demander of stuff, whether that's military equipment, roads, hospitals, is the government. So they're another player. And then, there's a spending on net exports. So basically, as foreigners buy more things than we are, um, you know, buying things from them, then there's going to be a positive balance of trade. And so that leads us to a wonderful equation. Oh, no, we haven't quite got there yet, but we, yeah, that becomes what's called, and we'll say this here, that we can write this as GDP equals C plus I plus G, and the final bit is this balance of trade. We call this EX minus IM. So let's put that as a small c there, because So GDP equals C plus I plus G plus X minus M. And, you've just got to remember that. You know what I mean? That's a key equation for so much of what we're going to do over the next couple of months. So understand that GDP, or we can call that Y. Y is production. GDP equals, you could call that, so GDP equals, it's the same as Y, equals C, consumption, plus private investment, plus government expenditure, plus exports minus imports. And together, EX minus IM is what's called the balance of trade. Okay, so let's carry on with that. Okay, so, it'd be interesting if I was in class, I would have asked you to guess what is the general percentage of all these things. Now, this is different from different countries, and this is the US. So actually in the US, basically a large part of the gross domestic product is expenditure on consumption. 67%. And that is a big driver of the US economy. That's why everyone all over the world wants a piece of the American economy. That's why, President Trump can put up these big tariffs and people will pay them, because they want to be selling goods into that enormous market for consumption of things, Then you've got business, private investment, 17.4%. Government expenditure is 18.5%. Now, you'll notice that all these, and then plus the net exports, add up to more than 100%, because that 3.1% should actually be negative, because that means the US imports more than they export. And that's generally seen as a negative thing. Obviously, there's some positives about it, but it can be seen as a negative thing. Okay, and it's been interesting over time. Investment has investment has generally sort of gone up a little bit over time. Government expenditure has gone down a little bit over time, but consumption has just gone up and up and up and up, And generally, the US has had a pretty negative balance of trade since the 1980s. If you look at this B, the imports and exports, up to about 1975, there were more exports than imports. But since 1975, 1980, imports have risen as we've come to the era of globalization, and exports have not, have yes, there's still a lot of exports, but there's less than the amount of imports. Okay, so and so it is sort of quite interesting how that happens. Because of the era of globalization from about 1985. If you notice it, both US exports have got stronger and stronger and stronger, but it's just they've been dwarfed by the amount of imports. And there are reasons for that we'll discuss later on. And so, when we have this final bit, the X minus M, is what's called the trade balance. So if X minus M, the EX minus IM, can be positive or negative. If it's positive, that's called a trade surplus, when a country's exports are larger than its imports, calculated as exports minus imports. Or there can be what the US has at the moment, a trade deficit, when a country imports exceed their exports. So if you're importing more stuff than you're exceeding, that last part of the equation, X minus M, becomes negative, and that's a trade deficit. Okay, so I think I'm going to sort of end it here because my throat's getting a bit funny. So again, this is your equation. GDP equals consumption, investment, plus government spending, plus trade balance, or GDP equals C plus I plus G plus X minus N. Now, if you can remember that and understand that, that's going to be the basis of everything we're going to do over the next few months. So really remember that. Gross domestic product equals domestic consumption plus private investment plus government expenditure plus the trade balance, which is exports minus imports. Okay, so I'm going to put up another video tomorrow for the next bit, and I hope this comes across well. Thank you.